Malcolm Harrington lounged in his deep burgundy Chesterfield armchair, the leather creaking under his weight as he raised his voice over the polite laughter of his elite guests. "Layla, come here," he called sharply, interrupting the murmured toasts and clinking glasses that filled his palatial Bel Air estate. From across the marble-floored living room, a petite 12-year-old girl froze mid-step. She had been carrying a tray of smoked salmon bites, helping her mother, Marisol, serve the crowd. Her hands still glistened from washing dishes moments earlier. The room's polished crowd turned toward her, their expressions a cocktail of curiosity and mild disdain. "My friends are growing bored," Malcolm announced with a smirk, gesturing toward the gleaming ebony grand piano in the corner. "I hear you can play. Why don't you give us a little performance?" From the velvet chaise, his daughter Bianca, 16 and dripping in Cartier, let out a mocking laugh. "Dad!" She probably thinks Chopin is a salad dressing. The room rippled with approving chuckles. Layla's spine stiffened. She had been trained by her mother to stand straight, no matter who was watching. From the doorway, Marisol's knuckles whitened around her serving tray. She knew better than to speak. The Harringtons valued their staff invisible. Malcolm clapped impatiently. "Come on. Something simple. Happy birthday will do." What no one in that room knew was that Layla had been waking up at 5 a.m. every morning for years, trudging 5 blocks to an abandoned community center where a retired music teacher let her practice on a dusty, battered piano. Her callous fingers weren't just from scrubbing floors. She walked slowly to the grand piano, her scuffed sneakers whispering against the marble. Sliding onto the bench, she adjusted the height and laid her hands over the keys. Malcolm leaned back, swirling his cognac. This would be amusing. Bianca pulled out her phone, her smirk widening. For a heartbeat, Layla hesitated. Then something in her gaze sharpened, the kind of focus born from being underestimated one too many times. The hush that followed felt charged, like the air before a storm. "Go on," Malcolm said, his tone dripping with false encouragement. Layla placed her fingers and asked softly, "May I choose the piece?" He gave a patronizing nod. "Play whatever you can manage. We're all ears." They didn't know she'd been taught by Hugo Alvarez, once a concert pianist in Buenos Aires before life had exiled him to anonymity. They didn't know Marisol spent her meager wages on worn sheet music, hiding it in their cramped quarters like forbidden treasure. Bianca snickered. "This is going to blow up on TikTok. Maid's kid massacres a Steinway." Layla inhaled slowly. "I hope you like Chopin," she said evenly, and began the first notes of the nocturne in E-flat major. The sound that emerged made several heads tilt. It wasn't halting or uncertain. It was precise, fluid. Hugo's years of patient instruction rippled through her touch. Her hands moved with the kind of discipline only 8 years of early morning practice could build. At first, Malcolm smirked, muttering to a guest, "Well, at least she knows where the keys are." But the smirk faded as the music unfolded. The murmurs died. Even Bianca lowered her phone an inch. The notes were no longer just correct. They were alive. Each phrase carried a quiet ache, an unspoken history. From the kitchen doorway, Marisol pressed a trembling hand to her lips. She had taught her daughter this posture, these habits, back when she herself still believed skill could open doors in this country. Midway through the piece, a new presence entered. Dr. Evelyn Rhodes, a world-renowned music critic and an old acquaintance of Malcolm's. She froze in the foyer, captivated by the sound. She had heard prodigies before, but never one quite like this. Moving silently, she stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the small figure at the piano. Malcolm shifted in his chair. This was too good. He hadn't planned for his little spectacle to draw admiration. Layla's hands danced the final measures of Chopin, and as the last note hung in the air, she lifted her chin and met Malcolm's gaze. "That," she said, "was a warm-up." She adjusted her seat, her voice calm but cutting through the stunned quiet. "Now I'll play something I wrote. It's called The Ones You Don't See." Layla's fingers brushed the keys like she was coaxing a secret from them. The first notes of The Ones You Don't See bloomed softly, delicate as footsteps down a dark hallway. It wasn't Chopin. It wasn't anything anyone in that room had heard before. The melody rose from a place deeper than technique, a place carved by years of overheard insults, by watching her mother bow her head in silence, by learning how to take up as little space as possible. Marisol's chest tightened. She knew every curve of this music. She had heard it in their small apartment, in the quiet hours before dawn. This was their story. The rhythm shifted, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then it swelled, layers of sound folding over one another. Dr. Evelyn Rhodes took a step closer, drawn toward the instrument like iron to a magnet. She reached for a phone, not to mock, but to record, the way one records in clips, knowing you might never see it again. Across the room, Bianca's smirk dissolved. Her phone, still recording, now captured her own slack-jawed disbelief. The piece had begun to coil around the room, pulling everyone into its orbit. Layla moved into a run of notes so fast, so precise, that even Evelyn's trained eyes widened. It was a passage you didn't just play. You survived it. Malcolm's drink hovered halfway to his lips. He wasn't thinking about entertaining his guests anymore. He was thinking about the fact that this girl, his maid's daughter, was doing something his privileged child, with all her expensive lessons, could not. The melody shifted again, now laced with syncopated rhythms, a clear nod to her mother's Colombian roots. The harmonies were rich, unexpected, daring. Margot Leland, wife of a shipping magnate, whispered, "My God, this is art." Her voice was almost reverent. Layla's small frame seemed too slight to contain such force. Her wrists flicked, her fingers flew, her body swayed with the tide of her own creation. From the doorway, Marisol's eyes glistened. She was no longer the invisible woman, in a press uniform, in this music. She was a proud teacher, the mother whose sacrifices had built this moment. The room was utterly still. No clinking glasses, no whispered gossip, just the music. Then the climax came, a furious, aching storm of sound. Each note felt like a strike against years of condescension. The Steinway roared under her touch, as if it had been waiting its whole life for this player. Evelyn's throat tightened. In 40 years of covering music, she had rarely seen compositional maturity like this in someone so young. The final passage slowed, softened, returning to that first ghostly melody. And then silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't dare breathe too soon. Evelyn was the first to move, clapping slowly, deliberately, as though afraid to break the spell too quickly. "Extraordinary," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Layla remained seated, her fingers still resting on the keys. Her eyes met Malcolm's again, steady and unflinching. "This piece," she said, "is about people you see every day but never notice. People like my mother, people like me." A flicker of something crossed Malcolm's face. Not humility exactly, but the beginning of it. Evelyn turned toward Marisol. Her gaze sharpened, recognition dawning. "Marisol Vega?" she asked. "First violinist of the Medellin Symphony?" The room gasped collectively, head swiveling toward the woman in the doorway. Marisol straightened, meeting Evelyn's eyes for the first time in 15 years. "It's been a long time," she said quietly. Evelyn stepped closer. "I wonder what happened to you." She turned to Malcolm, her voice like ice. "You've had one of Latin America's most accomplished musicians cleaning your floors for over a decade. And her daughter? She's one of the most gifted young composers I've heard in my life." Bianca lowered her phone completely, her face pale. This was no longer just an awkward evening. This was the moment the Harrington name would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Evelyn Rhodes turned her phone toward him. The screen glowed with the recording she had just captured. "This," she said, "is going to change everything." Bianca glanced down at her own phone, realizing with dread that her video told a very different story than she planned. Instead of a humiliating clip to share with her friends, it was a perfect record of her own sneering arrogance, followed by her stunned silence as a Prodigy eclipsed her. Within 24 hours, Bianca's video was everywhere. Hashtag Maid Plays the Masters trended on social media, followed closely by hashtag Genius in Plain Sight. The comments were merciless. Imagine spending $50,000 a year on piano lessons only to get obliterated by a girl who practices on a broken instrument. This is why you don't underestimate quiet people. The Maid's Daughter is the future of classical music. Clips of Layla's performance circulated alongside screenshots of Malcolm's smug expression before the music began and the slack-jawed disbelief after. The transformation was cinematic, and the internet feasted on it. News outlets picked it up. Evelyn's column in the Los Angeles Herald, titled "The Ones We Refuse to See," was a scalding indictment of privilege and wasted talent. She wrote about how genius can bloom in the most overlooked places, and how arrogance can be dismantled in under 10 minutes. Malcolm tried damage control, hiring a PR firm to reframe the night as a private audition he had graciously hosted. But the narrative was out of his hands. Every repost, every article, every reaction video painted the same picture. Malcolm Harrington, the man who tried to use a girl as party entertainment and accidentally revealed her as a once-in-a-generation talent. The Los Angeles Philharmonic reached out to Marisol the same week. They wanted her as guest conductor for a special concert. Meanwhile, Layla received a full scholarship to the Conservatory of Music, complete with housing and a stipend. 3 recording companies offered to produce her debut album, starting with The Ones You Don't See. For the first time in years, Marisol and Layla walked through Bel Air without their shoulders hunched. People stopped them, not to order them around, but to shake their hands. Bianca, on the other hand, vanished from social media. Her friends quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be linked to the viral humiliation. Her once carefully curated image had been replaced online with screenshots of her smirk, her phone aimed mockingly at the piano, and the caption, "This aged badly in record time." Malcolm's business partners pulled out of key deals. His name became synonymous with blind arrogance. He stopped receiving invitations to the very circles he once dominated. One evening, as Marisol prepared for her first rehearsal with the Philharmonic, she received a text from Evelyn. It was short, but it made her smile for the first time in a long while. "They see you now." 2 years later, the lights of the Walt Disney Concert Hall burned like captured starlight. The city outside throbbed with life, but inside, an almost sacred hush settled over the audience. The program read, Layla Marquez, debut recital. Piano, Steinway Model D. Conductor, Marisol Marquez. Backstage, Layla adjusted her simple black dress, her fingers hovering above the keys in her mind before touching them in reality. Marisol, now an acclaimed conductor, stepped beside her, smoothing an invisible wrinkle on her sleeve. "Don't play to prove anything," Marisol whispered. "Play because the music belongs to you." When Layla stepped on stage, the applause was immediate but restrained, as though the audience sensed this was not a night for noise. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and began. The first notes were delicate, almost hesitant, like a bird testing the air. But then the melody unfurled, full of the same untamed fire that had stunned that living room years ago, only now shaped by discipline and mastery. Each piece carried its own story. A Rachmaninoff prelude that seemed to open a window into winter skies, a Debussy that painted moonlight and sound, and her own composition, Shadows in Gold, which brought listeners to the edge of tears. When the final chord dissolved into silence, the pause that followed was pure, unbroken magic. Then the room erupted. People rose to their feet, shouting, clapping, whistling. Flowers landed at her feet in bright, fragrant piles. Among the crowd, Evelyn Rhodes dabbed at her eyes, remembering the trembling girl with wet hands serving canapes. A few rows back, Bianca watched in silence, older now, her arrogance gone, a quiet understanding in her gaze. And Malcolm? He was nowhere to be seen. After a series of failed ventures and public embarrassments, he had retreated from Los Angeles entirely. His name, when spoken, was only in passing, as a footnote to a story that had outgrown him. After the concert, reporters crowded the stage doors. One asked Layla, "When did you know you were meant for this?" Layla thought of the broken piano in their old apartment, of her mother's tired hands cooking after 12-hour days, of a night she played for a room full of people who had already decided who she was before she even touched the keys. "I didn't know," she said. I just kept playing until they couldn't ignore me anymore. That quote would headline articles the next day. But for Marisol, the real victory was quieter, walking hand in hand with her daughter into the cool night air, knowing the world would never again look at her child and see only a servant's daughter. Because genius, once revealed, can never be hidden again.